AskReddit by Lucky Lacey KS. What cult is the most disturbing to you? There are probably worse ones out there, but the only one I have first-hand knowledge of is Scientology. Their entry-level stuff doesn't sound all that insane until you realize suppressive person really means anyone who thinks Scientology is nonsense. Then they encourage you to cut those disbelievers out of your life. Disconnection policy, even if they're family members. Your reward for doing all of this is the privilege of spending roughly $250k to reach OT3 and finding out South Park was telling the truth about Xenu. Don't get me started on the child labor and human trafficking within the Sea Org. Suffice it to say Scientology is one hell of a rabbit hole. The fact. Operation Snow White. https://en.m.wiki.org/operation_snow_white got so far is what's crazy to me. Can't believe nobody here is talking about Aum Shinrikyo. Literally a doomsday cult, who took matters into their own hands. Aum Shinrikyo committed multiple terrorist attacks in Japan, including the 1995 Tokyo sarin gas attack. While only 13 people died in that incident, over 1,000 were injured, and had the attack gone according to their original plan, both those numbers could have been significantly higher. The scariest part to me? The goal was to trigger an international conflict, involving nuclear war, again, to trigger the very doomsday they preached. It's one thing to convince your followers the world is ending. It's an entirely another thing to convince them to bring it about. Fun fact, Japan has almost zero public trash bins to this day due primarily to the anthrax attacks. People's Temple, Johnstown, and Heaven's Gate. The eerie darkness and influence over the followers' loss of lives of these two had always stuck out to me. To me, Heaven's Gate wasn't nearly as terrifying as People's Temple. HG folks were nuts, but seemed so happy, like they truly believed that was what their entire life was meant for. Brainwashed? Sure, still sad. But part of me even believes that Marshall Applewhite wasn't even evil. I think he was just batshit insane and believed every word he said himself. But Jim Jones was evil. No doubt about it. The last audio recording of Johnstown is truly horrifying. So many didn't want to do it, and then to hear all the babies stop crying one by one still makes me sick. IBLP. It's extraordinarily restrictive. Look up the Duggars. Watch shiny happy people on Prime if you want to fall down a rabbit hole. Blue Oyster Cult. They apparently don't even fear the Reaper. Well, to be fair, the seasons don't fear the Reaper. Nor do the wind, the sun, or the rain. Why not be like they are? People's Temple FLDS Scientology. The fact that Warren Jeffs still run FLDS from prison, it's a fucking messed up cult. Children of God, the Family International, so much CSA. COG was the cult Reverend Joaquin Phoenix's parents were involved in back in the 70s. They worked and lived in Puerto Rico, where Joaquin was born, and South America as missionaries until mom and dad got wise to the creepy practices of the cult, including sexual activity among prepubescent children, and fled back to the US. Scientology. Their power and reach is terrifying. I stayed at a hotel last week and there was a Scientology channel on the channel guide-in room. The troubled teen industry. Any parent that gets pissed off at their teenage son or daughter can have them locked up without trial. They are run on child, slave labor, and maintain order by humiliation and coercion. Letters and phone calls are watched closely but eventually just comply because these places are designed to break your spirit so they can extract as much money by keeping kids there as long as possible. It's a huge industry with close ties to political figures like Mitt Romney, and you rarely ever hear about it. Most people leave with a lot more trauma than they came in with. I went to a wilderness program called On Track that was shut down after they suffocated a child while restraining him, and the next school I went to got shut down. When a kid's parents found out, the school took him to the local jail, placed him in a cell where he was stripped down and according to the housed. https://alun.school/right square bracket open bracket https://alun.school, is finally finished. Incredible read. I'm sorry you had to experience those places and hope you are doing well now. I recently learned about the Killing Hour cult. I think its official name is different. Not a lot of information out there and it was relatively small. But the story about the Messiah killing his mom, then his sisters lining up to wait for their turn to be killed, that's wild. Whoa, I'll Google it, but any news articles on it? The People's Temple by far is the freakiest to me. Their leader was suffering dementia or strokes and became more and more irrational to the point he convinced everyone to kill themselves. No strokes, drug abuse. My mistake. I got him mixed up with a totally different true crime case. Okay, I've read a lot about this cult. Jim Jones wasn't suffering from dementia or strokes. He was suffering from a hardcore amphetamine addiction. And his decision to force a mass suicide wasn't even necessarily irrational from his perspective. He had painted himself into a corner where his only options left were suicide or prison. But there was no good reason for the rest of the group to die with him. Also, I would describe Jones as just evil. I hate to call someone evil, but if anyone fits the bill, he did. An absolutely remorseless manipulator, liar, and sadist whose overarching goal in life seemed to be to reduce his followers to little more than slaves to him. He was a very bad person even before started abusing drugs, though the drugs seemed to crank up his evilness to 11. Was looking for local music groups on Meetup and found an interesting one. Made for young adults 20-40 and meant to have friends and work on social skills. Thank God I scrolled all the way to the bottom because it said the event was supported by the Church of Scientology. Cults that prefer followers die in pain rather than getting simple treatment. Jehovah's Witness with blood transfusion. Scientology with psychiatry, or Christian Science with nearly all medical treatment. No matter how you think about Islam or Judaism, they at least let followers break rules to save their life. Not let, require. In Judaism, if you have to eat a double bacon cheeseburger to live, you are required to eat that double bacon cheeseburger. Human life is more important than any of the other rules. I have a lot of friends who are IBLP survivors. Really bad abuse, cover-ups, no accountability. IBLP? OMG, I had never heard of the Anthill cult and I'm feeling sick now. Perhaps there are worse cults than Jim Jones' People's Temple, but the mass suicide happened when I was 10 and we had cable and newspaper subscriptions for the first time. It really had an impact on me. For the first time I understood that there was something nuts about the world and adults didn't really have their ball of wax together after all. Those school-based ones like Alun, where the child's parents pay someone to abduct the kid from their beds in the middle of the night. What actually happens in the schools is extremely disturbing. Tom Hanks sent his son to one of those. I mean, Scientology and Falun Gong seem to have a pretty persistent presence in my local area. However, the one that bothers me the most is the weird culty behavior surrounding MAGA. Texas A&M, M. For real. I have relatives who are Aggies, so I've had a front row seat to the show all my life. MAGA. What gets me about them is how hard evangelical Christians fell for MAGA. Trump is probably the least Christ-like figure on the planet. Scientology. Those fuckers broke into the FBI to replace document they had on them with Scientology approved documents. I haven't seen my mom in nearly 2 years thanks to the Jehovah's Witness organization. They had her shun everyone right after dad died. Still grieving them both. I'm so sorry. Right now, Falun Gong, because they are deeply influencing my relatives. https://www //inside-fallen-gong-master-li-dong-dash-11-2-1/inside-fallen-gong-li-dong-spring/124425118. The Epoch Times news outlet is a far-right publication devoted to Trump, anti-Chinese agitprop, and fearful conspiracies. It's scary stuff. The FLDS. Scientology will always be my answer to this question. Evil organization that needs to lose their tax-exempt status.